Hi, I'm Kimberlea Smarr. Welcome to Regulation Before Rehabilitation. This is session 2, all about the spine, the axis of possibility, and this is part of the BeWell Method. I welcome you. You're probably here because either you've seen the first session or you're curious about what does regulation mean, nervous system regulation before rehabilitation. So I welcome you. I welcome your curiosity. I think this is about nervous system literacy, and this really is, the next wave of medicine and how we can care and work with the whole person. So I'm so excited to share this today. We're going to talk all about the spine and how that works inside of creating a regulatory response. And I'm excited to share. So thanks for being here. I want to ground us first, though, by the mission of Be Well Yoga. It's to redefine rehabilitation through nervous system literacy. The Be Well method equips clinicians and patients with accessible, evidence based tools that regulate before they rehabilitate, transforming recovery from a mechanical process into a living adaptive dialogue between body, breath, and brain. To make nervous system informed movement as fundamental to healthcare as strength, mobility, and endurance, helping clinicians deliver results that last and patients rebuild trust in their bodies from the inside out. The vision of BeWell Method is a healthcare culture where regulation and resilience are inseparable, where clinicians and patients speak the same embodied language and one that honors biology, choice, and the body's innate drive to heal. Every medical and movement setting includes space for nervous system education, not as an alternative, but as an essential part of recovery. This is formed in a sense of unity and connection, where yoga meets medicine, where science merges with story, and where clinician and patient connect. One breath, one choice, one movement at a time. So I'm so glad you're here, and let's go ahead and get started. I have my friend here, and we're going to talk about the spine. So, the spine is this amazing structure that is at the very center of the body, and it houses our central nervous system. I'm going to move my camera here so we can just take a peek upwards. And we're going to talk really simply about the structure of the spine to begin with. So, we have the vertebrae, and we have the discs in between the vertebrae, and we have the 7 vertebrae, which are considered the cervical spine. And these house the nerves that govern the arms, the neck, the upper body. And the neck is the most mobile region of the spine. And this is really important because it's mobile so that our head and our eyes can sense all directions around us. Right? And so our ability to move and look and slowly observe what's behind us is an important aspect of feeling that we're safe in our environment. So cervical spine has 7 vertebrae, and then the thoracic spine has the ribs attached. So there's 12 thoracic vertebrae. And because it has this extra support, spin my friend around here sideways, because it has that extra support, there's a lot of structure here. And the structure has a lot of stability for a very good reason, because it houses our nervous system, or all the major organs, in addition to the nervous system, the central nervous system that's running through. But this cage is to protect our heart, it's to protect our lungs and our major organs so that we're safe and healthy. And it's an intelligent design. The lumbar vertebrae, there's 5 of them, and you can probably notice here that they're much larger, and there's a very good reason for that. Our bodies are designed really intelligently, and because these are going to bear more load, they're larger because they're going to hold up the entire rest of that column. The spine has curves in it. We have lordotic and kyphotic curves. So lordotic curve is in the um, cervical spine and in the lumbar spine, and that means that the curve goes into the body. And then we have the kyphotic curve in the thoracic spine, which means that it moves out. And when, we're rolled up as a little embryo, we are this little kyphotic curve. And as we're born and we come into the world, these secondary curves, the lordotic curves, are formed. So first is our head and our neck, right? Because we need to look up and see where mom is so we can get fed. And then the lumbar curve isn't actually fully developed until we're about 10 years old. But because of those curves, it creates this efficiency and the ability for us to have some shock absorbing and some movement. And remember, this is housing the central nervous system. This is this communication highway that's running right through the very center. So, two other keystones that I want to mention, I want to talk about here is the sacrum, which is at the bottom of the spine. And then the occiput, let me go up here, the skull. Don't worry about his fractured skull. And these two areas, the occiput, the back of the skull, and the sacrum here, are where all of your parasympathetic nerves come out of. So I'm going to circle back really quick. What does it mean to be regulated? Let's establish that. Regulation does not mean to be calm all the time. I want to get really clear about that. Regulation does not mean that we're calm all the time. So when that misconception is out there, we think that when we're elevated, there's something wrong with us. Regulation means that we can move from a heightened state of arousal and awareness back down to peace and calm again. That heightened state of awareness and arousal is governed by the nerves that run through the spine. That's the sympathetic nervous system. They exit here. The parasympathetic, the rest and digest, exit here and here at the sacrum. Now, why am I saying this? Because that information itself is so helpful in understanding. Cranial sacral therapists have this dialed in already. They understand that working with those two keystones of the skull and the sacrum are really valuable in helping people become more receptive, to help them relax, because a lot of times dysregulation means that we are stuck, and it's normally stuck in that upregulated state. That sympathetic tone is happening all the time, even if it's low grade, that we actually never know how to pull that down. So it becomes like the light switch clicked on, and you stay on in that sympathetic state. Well, regulation means that it's a dimmer switch. So we go up, we can, meet the demands or the challenge or the anxiety of our life with appropriate response. But then we can also lower it like a dimmer switch and come back down to rest and peace and calm again so that we can regenerate, we can renew, and we can process things and keep what we need and get rid of what we don't. But a lot of times what happens is that this regulation is stuck on. So don't mistake regulation for being calm. That is not helpful. But what we're trying to do is to help people work through that whole range and give them access to that, because anything that's stuck, right? If we're stuck on, is my philosophy teacher would say it's a violation against nature, because nature is always moving. And we want that movement up and down for regulation. So I should have probably started with that, but I want to start there. So these two keystones of sacrum and skull, I cue these in a yoga class oftentimes. I will start my students on their back. I will talk about letting the back of their head get heavy, the back of their pelvis get heavy, because even just that felt sense of those two bones being cradled, just like when you cradle a baby on their little bottom in the back of their skull, right? That those two areas give us this information that we're safe and we're okay. And we need to have that in order to heal, not just repair. A lot of times that repairing, right, is going to happen because our body's designed, but repair doesn't mean healing. I'm going to say that again. Repairing doesn't actually equate healing in the body, heart, mind. So it's part of the process, but to really heal, we need to have those places where we're able to come out of that heightened state of arousal and awareness. Because when we're in that heightened state, all of these emergency chemicals are surging through us. So, um, occiput, sacrum, really important keystones at either side of the spine, because this is, again, where our parasympathetic nerves exit and come into the body. And then the sympathetic nerves, right, are running through this channel that we just talked about, cervical, thoracic, lumbar. So in between the vertebrae, we have discs. Oop, and I talked about that already. So the occiput and the sacrum, really important keystones to understand. When I learned about that dynamic, it really changed the way that I started to help people enter a state of relaxation. So just kind of put that in your back pocket. Know that those two areas are places that we can cue and sense and feel. You could probably even take a moment and let the back of your skull get heavy, let the back of your sacrum kind of drop back towards your chair, and just take a smooth breath in and out, and just notice, what does that do in real time? Because oftentimes what happens is we're like, our eyes are in front of us, right? And that's like the skull moving forward. And there's sort of this tension inside of the body. And to be able to lean back, rest back, it's a form of trust in the moment. And that trust inside of the moment is going to unlock those parts of ourselves that are ready to heal and not just repair. And the stack, let me say this again, the spine is not just a stack of bones. It is an engineering miracle. Modern day engineering cannot replicate or duplicate the spine. It is designed to be really strong and stable, as you can tell, from this um, structure of the bones, but it's also designed to be supple and adaptable, highly adaptable. And when those two things merge, it creates maximum freedom. In yoga terms, we say stiram, which is strong and stable, and sukham, which is soft and supple. And when those two things find each other, it's svatantriya, it's freedom. And this structure is how we were built. This is at the middle of every single person. This is like um, learning to really come back to the center of our being. The way it's designed, it handles load, it absorbs shock. And because of that, it gives us this ability to move through our life with a sense of freedom and ease when it's unlocked and it's cared for. So I like to talk about the movements of the spine. This is something I am always educating my students on, my clients on, yoga teachers on, because these are things that we should be doing every single day. I consider this like the alphabet of movement. And when we learn our alphabet first, right, we learn the alphabet before we learn to spell. Once we have that alphabet of movement, we can start to put together those words or those letters and create words. The words then eventually become sentences, they become paragraphs, and maybe even poetry. So the 6 movements of the spine are, sorry about that. The 6 movements of the spine, I like to pair them because in my brain it's easier to remember because they're opposites of each other. So we have flexion and extension. So flexion, list down, is where we round the spine and we bring the front of the body towards each other. And we're flexing the front of the spine. because this is all going to be oriented around the front of the spine, the anterior aspect of the spine. And then when we extend the spine, that's where we're bringing these 2 points away from each other. This is like a back bending um, place, right? So we're flexing, we're bringing the front of the body closer together, and then we're extending and we're moving the front of the body and elongating from pubic bone to sternum, those 2 points. So those are easy. It's like cat cow. It is cat cow. It's not like cat cow, but those are embedded, and many people already know those 2 shapes and the names of yoga poses that we do really often. Lateral bending right is, side bending right and side bending left. They're coupled together. So now we already have 4 of the 6 movements, cat cow, right and left side bending. And then we have rotation, right and left. And those 2 rotations, right and left, then equate to the 6 movements of the spine. Now, we don't need to go into a lot of details, but I want you to know that each segment of the spine is designed with different movement capacities. So you can tell maybe already by the curves of the spine that this more stable part of the spine, if we're going to cat-cow here, that extension is going to be a little less because of how stable it is. And that stability is a good thing unless the stability starts to override and we get stuck. So anytime we're stuck and we can't come out of that, that's where we start to see dysfunction arise inside of the structure and the posture. And repetitive motion, the number one repetitive motion is our posture. So if we're sitting at a computer for 8 hours a day and we're sort of stuck in this posture, to not be able to come back out of it, it doesn't mean we can't go this way. It just means, can you come out of that? And that normally is a really interesting investigation because we want that movement. And same thing, rotation is actually how this area of the spine is really great. It's designed for rotation, right? Not necessarily extension, but we do get some extension here, and we don't want to lose that. But it's designed for rotation. So when we are turning side to side, that turning motion, we want to make sure that we're adding that in because the body craves diversity of movement. The low back, though, is not designed to twist very much. It does twist, but just like this area of the spine doesn't extend all that much, this area of the spine is not designed to twist all that much. And sometimes we, take it into the low back, and that can create just, some mm, not optimal or ideal, right? But I also don't want to say that this doesn't twist because it absolutely does. And for people, it varies different, anywhere from 5 to 20 degrees of rotation right and left. And so we want to keep that. We don't want to lose it. We don't want to be scared of it. We don't want to create this like, oh my gosh, if I twist in my low back, I'm going to do something. It's giving us this pathway and this map of movement inside of ourselves so that we can keep reaching for how it is our body moves optimally so that it can stay nourished. And the other part of this is when we're moving optimally, when we have that diversity of movement, that alphabet of movement in our body, it's not just informing the spine and our bones. Our digestive system reacts differently. Our respiratory system is different. All of our systems, our lymphatic system, it's assisting this whole body and this whole unit to thrive and to heal and to repair. So we're moving these essential parts through us. So the spine, the movements of the spine, if we could do these every day, I think this is something that is an essential thing. I even think we should learn this probably in kindergarten. But but being able to move in this variety of ways is really the design of our body. Now, we're going to understand too that people have limitations. And so it doesn't mean that we're going to have this same range of motion in every aspect of our lives, but we do still move these ways. And we want to encourage the spine and connect with it and communicate with it because it houses our nervous system. Our spinal cord is running through there. And I think of it like an antenna. and and if the antenna is kinked, right, the reception isn't clear. Maybe it's static and we can't really see what's happening. And so it creates this sense of fear. So the more and more that we can nourish the body and nourish that center point and connect to it, then the clearer it is that we're receiving the world. So the other really interesting thing I love to share is that the discs between the spines, it's easier to see them this way. The discs in between the spine actually don't have any direct blood supply. They don't, drink the way that like our muscles do. They need movement. And like I said before, I'm going to keep reemphasizing this, movement matters. Diversity of movement matters because these discs in between the vertebrae pull in nutrition and moisture from the surrounding tissues. So if we're locked into a position and we're not moving in a variety of ways, these discs aren't getting the moisture that they need in order to be those shock absorbers that we really want. So the way that they the process of pulling in the moisture is called imbibing. And lately, what I've been describing is like a dried out sponge on your kitchen counter, maybe first thing in the morning, the one that's it's like crusty. And if you tried to you know, clean up something on your counter that was wet, it's not even going to absorb anything because it's like dried out and crusty. We don't want that in the center that's housing our nervous system. We want that sponge that's been wet, wrung out, and now it's got this pliability and this moisture and it can pick things up. We can rinse it out really easily, really clearly. So without movement, our discs dry out. That's sort of a dramatic way to say it, but they stiffen over time and they're not stiff in a supportive way. They're stiff in a rigid way where it's going to restrict mobility. And so we become fragile. Pain signals increase because there's a lack of sense of safety inside of movement. Hydrated discs through movement are pliable, they're resilient, they absorb shock. And to nourish that, encourage that every single day, I think it's just as imperative to move our spine like this throughout the day as it is to brush our teeth. I heard about a study recently. I don't have it cited, but I'll give you a lot of evidence later on. I'll point you to that. But the study I'm getting ready to mention, I don't have it cited, but it's really interesting. They casted runners. They casted their spine and they asked them to run and they measured and they used more oxygen running. They fatigued more. Their movement economy went way down. And so having this mobility in the center of us really dialed in and a priority matters. It's at our center for a reason. And I love metaphorically to talk about this. It's like, can we draw ourselves back to our center? Can we pull in and create this connection with our deep center? And I think that that really speaks to people because we're living in such a chaotic time that we do need moments of reprieve. We do need time to really be able to come back home to ourselves. So, a body that doesn't move is also a body that's holding tension, chronic stress, trauma, all of that has a posture. It has a way that it lives in our tissue. And gently, not, we're not trying to violently put people into these shapes and ask them all of a sudden to move when they haven't for a while, or to crack something open that's not ready to be released. But what we are doing is encouraging this sense of safety through the movement of the spine really gently, so that over time it starts to create these signals of safety. And this is relevant not just to movement modalities like PT, OT, but this is, pain clinics, anxiety, PTSD, depression. These are postures that are locked inside of our tissues, and to give ourselves gentle practices to begin to coax that in a different direction so we're not locked in, I think is such an important part of rehabilitation. The spine is the central highway of the nervous system. Remember, our our brain is housed above that, but the spine is housing that highway of information. And again, it's not just a physical story. There is mental um, and emotional chemical byproducts. We all know our body when it's sore from movement. Say we went outside and shoveled a lot of snow, right? And we don't do that regularly. So you could see how you would be sore the next day, and that would make sense. We understand that. But what a lot of times is overlooked is that we don't realize that thinking thoughts has a chemical byproduct. Just like moving repetitively through our body has a chemical byproduct, and we see that as soreness in our muscles, thinking thoughts, emotions also have a chemical byproduct. And those get housed inside of our tissues and create postures, just like when we move a muscle or we do a new movement and the next day we're sore. And so that tension and those stories and that life that we all live, that complicated life, gets housed inside of the tissues. And how then can we start to process and move that, and move it out of us so that there's a sense of safety again? And that's where I think this literacy of the nervous system, but also this fluency of movement, where we understand how we move, why we move. The why is incredibly impactful when I teach people this. You should be moving 6 of these directions every day. And it doesn't have to be dramatic, it can be gentle, but it's because it nourishes your center. That's a really powerful teaching point. So when we move in the 6 directions, in the BeWell Method, the way that I have this formatted, when we move and then we pair it with the breath, it becomes regulation instantly. It really increases the regulatory component of the movement because we're generating this internal awareness of the breath and the movement together. So the 2 ways that we can work with the breath and these movements, let's say we're in flexion. So we're rounding the spine, coiling in. We could hold this shape for 3 to 5 breaths, really exploring, where does the breath go into? Where does the breath come out of? And I start to really sense and feel that, is the body opening up just a little bit more and letting more breath in on the inhale. Where is it releasing tension on the exhale? So to be able to hold that static shape and then to breathe into it is really an informative way to connect to the breath. And it becomes this practice of presence, not perfection. The second way is more of a dynamic movement. This is where I like to pair like the opposites together. So we have extension and flexion. So now the breath becomes the teacher, and the breath is moving us into this shape, and the breath is moving us out of this shape. And so it suspends the mind just that tiny bit, because we're letting the breath move in and out, and we're following the breath. And the breath then is this thread that makes the spinal movements turn into medicine, not just for the body. Yes, it includes the body and the structure, but for our minds and our hearts because of where it's taking us. So the safety signal is when our body can come down and start to heal instead of just repair. I have this slide in here. I probably should have taken it out. This is only three of the studies that I've cited in my evidence, but we all know probably the polyvagal theory. Explain Pain is an incredible resource, and there's another study that talks about how mindful movement of the spine actually nourishes the brain. So, not just kind of flopping around and moving, but mindful, intentional movement of the spine actually nourishes and changes our brain, right? Our central nervous system. It's good, good stuff, you guys. So, um, this is considered bottom-up regulation for those of you that understand that terminology. We that top-down processing isn't always the way that we're going to shift things in real time. Um, Anxiety has a posture, heartbreak has a posture, frustration has a posture. And I'm not saying any of these are bad or wrong. It's just, are we stuck there? Can we find ways to open ourselves back up to life? Because life is dramatic sometimes. It's heartbreaking sometimes. It's hard sometimes. It's not what we expect a lot of times. And instead of guarding and protecting constantly from everything, we want to make sure that we're safe. But when we are safe, we need to recognize that and come back out into the world and make those positive adaptations mentally, physically, and emotionally to become resilient. So this is not only for um, physical health, right? I've said that before. This is for mental and behavioral health too. This really can inform both of these things because hopefully the reason you're interested in this is because you're interested in whole patient care, that we understand the body keeps the score. Right? Vander Kolk, the book, if you haven't read that, amazing. You should read it. You might need to make sure you have a therapist lined up. I certainly did need to get one, but the body keeps the score because where else would we put it? Our body is so generous. It's so beautifully designed. And of course, our story is housed inside of it, but we want to keep writing our story. We don't want to get stuck on one page. So, in the BeWell Method, the program that I've designed, the method that I've designed is this framework for regulation inside of clinical use. It's rooted in yoga, but it's built for clinical use. And level one is all about sort of laying out this foundation of breath, why the breath is important. And if that's the only thing people get to, great. I think it will change people's lives. I think it will change your experience of patient client interaction. And I think it'll make what you do in the clinic land and go even further just by understanding the mechanics and breath and the awareness of the three centers and that gentle introduction and education of nervous system literacy. So level one, all about the breath. Level two is where I start to introduce the six movements of the spine. This is another layer of education inside of their nervous system. It's like, look, our center needs to be nourished, not just physically, but even that metaphorically, like we need to go inside and tend to this part of ourselves, the unseen parts of ourselves. And by tending to that regularly, it starts to shift us. Here's a vocabulary, or here's an alphabet that's going to build a vocabulary of safe movement for your body while you recover, or while your heart is broken, or while you're dealing with this crisis in your life. And it's introduced, and there's a small education portion for the patient or the client, and it's introduced lying down because we're working with the sacrum and the occiput, these two keystones, remember, or the occiput and the sacrum, I did that wrong. And having that interaction of laying back and having those areas supported instigates parasympathetic response. Then we gently start to move the body into these different shapes just to explore and to notice and to create this awareness and interoception of their experience. But then that practice of reclining, whether we're holding it statically, because there's two options, or moving on the breath, right? I keep doing all these different shapes with my hand. I should be doing it with my spine. But being able to either do it and hold those shapes or move with the shapes on the breath, right? There's different practices that address both of those. And then there's really this gentle way then that they can practice or address themselves each day or as you prescribe it, especially on like high pain days, days that they're really tired, fibromyalgia patients, on recovery days. So it's introduced in this very gentle way. But now that there's this foundation that's been laid, now they understand they have these letters that we're going to form words with and then sentences with, hopefully, maybe paragraphs, and maybe it becomes this moment of poetry, of movement in their bodies eventually. So, starting with that basic foundation of lying down and introducing that, then it gives them this place to begin and to come back to, even if they progress inside of the program, because there's 4 levels. So let me pause for a moment and just explain this a little bit if you're not familiar with it. The BeWell Method, the product itself is a patient library. It's a video library of practices, of 4 levels of practice that are progressive. And when you use the BeWell Method, you have a training, a one-time training as a clinician. This is all virtual. And it's about 3 hours, and it just orients you to the library so you understand how to use it. So just like we're talking here, if you want to take these 6 movements to your patients, that's amazing. I hope you do that. But if you don't have time for that and you know how valuable it is now, you have a resource. So this library, hopefully you're understanding there's this intelligent progression that's being added together throughout these levels. You get to train, you get to understand in less than 3 hours how the library is put together, and then you assign them to your clients. And it can be assigned as a self-guided thing where you're like, hey, we really think that nervous system literacy and regulation is really important and should be a part of your recovery. Here's the patient library. Start at level 1 and go at your own pace. You don't have to get through all of it. Find the things that speak to you. You can also, by understanding the library as a clinician, you can assign those practices very specifically. You're like, I want this patient to do this and this and this, because this is going, I see where this is going to help their recovery. So you get to kind of move through that in several ways. And then what it's doing then is it's giving them this nervous system literacy and tools in between visits. So they're coming to you more receptive for your work. So I want to circle back because the spine, this is what we're talking about today, is not just structural. I hope that you take that away today. Like, yes, there are spine issues that are structural and back pain. There's a lot of research. There's plenty of people who have bulging discs who don't have pain. So it's an interesting thing to start to explore. How do we reconnect people back to these back to these parts of themselves that are unseen, underexplored, and in that reconnection provide them a sense of sovereignty over their healing and education that really can be carried over. Because when our spine is moving well, everything else in rehabilitation is going to land deeper. So, where do you want to go next? If you're a clinician and this is enticing or you want to know more, this is exciting, one, show up next month for the foot part of this session. So that'll be the third session in this series. Again, the three pillars of the BeWell Method are breath, spine, and feet. And everybody's always like, feet? Why feet? Well, come and you'll find out and you'll be surprised. And I promise you, it will probably change you as an individual who has a couple of feet, but you'll also understand the importance of it. So that's step one. Another step is if you're like, I want to do this. I think this is important. I want this as a resource. I have a founding member cohort that's starting right now. It's at an incredible price. Sometimes people see that price and they're like, oh, that's a lot of money. You get the training, you get over 60 patient videos, and it's less than $50 a month to have unlimited resources for your patient, unlimited access for your patients, because there's not a fee for your patient to use this. You buy this, you license it, you train once, and then you license it annually. And this price, because it's still in its founding, um, it's in the founding cohort phase, is quite a bit reduced from what it will be. It's going to be over twice that amount eventually once I hard launch. This is going into the research space. I am developing feasibility right now, and I would love for you to be a founding member and be a part of this and help me build this out to be even more effective than it already is, because I need your feedback. So if you're interested in that, I would love to hear from you. And yeah, we can work things out. Let's have a call. Let's have a conversation. So if you came and you're a yoga teacher, stay tuned. I'm building something for you around this method so that you can resource this for your students. And then if you are a patient, a client, just a curious mover who has a body, then and you want to work with me individually, I am still taking one-on-one clients for a limited amount of time. So you can reach out to me. My contact information is here. You can screenshot that. I'll send out this recording. And with this recording, I'll put a link to the landing page for clinicians that tells you all about what the BeWell method is and what it entails. So hopefully that gives you some information. But I hope today that you take away the importance of the spine and the 6 movements of the spine. If you take nothing else away, it's that we need to be moving in a diverse way, those 6 letters, those 6 alphabet letters of movement every single day to nourish our very center. And as we learn to nourish our center, I hope that that gives us access to a more sovereign experience for patients to heal and take charge of their health and not just repair. And I hope that this information allows what you do as a clinician to go even further, because I know that what you do is already well informed and you're a deeply caring person, or else you wouldn't be here. So thank you for the work that you do with your patients already. And I would love to hear from you and work together if that fits. So reach out and let's keep talking about what does it mean for regulation before rehabilitation. Come to the foot session next month. And yeah, thank you guys so much.